Well, hey everybody, my name is Nicholas Jackson and I'm an artist from northern Minnesota. And today we are going to talk about my process. And we're gonna watch the whole thing through in this crazy, super fast way. So with a painting like this, I would typically start with a small thumbnail or comp, but I had a pretty good idea of where I wanted to go. So we're gonna start right into the sketching phase. Now I am on a iPad in Procreate, and which allows me to sketch digitally, which I love because I can move things around, I can flip the screen. It's pretty great. Once I get that done, I then print that out and transfer it to this piece of paper with the aid of an opaque projector that I keep downstairs just for this very purpose. We just kind of sketch the lines in very, very lightly so that I can actually come in and do the drawing. Now, as an artist, the drawing is absolutely my favorite part. I mean, it's not even close. I love rendering out a drawing, especially if I have a sketch to work from underneath. Now, the sketch is pretty loose, but it works as a great guide. I've always believed that having a strong foundation in a painting is paramount. If you just kind of start drawing or painting from one edge to the other without any pre-planning, there's going to be a lot of things that can go wrong. This is all about decreasing variables, especially when speed is very important, specifically in illustration when you're up against a deadline. Working loosely in a linear line to a final painting allows you to tackle things one at a time. You know, you can tackle composition, you can tackle form, gesture, and not have to worry about color or mood or anything like that, and then just kind of tackle that later. Now I am drawing on Strathmore Bristol, which is the 500 series. It's actually 4-ply, which is pretty much indestructible. You can do crazy washes over this and it doesn't break down. I really like it. It's a vellum surface. I think I prefer the smooth one a little bit more, and it doesn't even require any sort of soaking the paper. I just kind of tape down the edges to make sure that it doesn't buckle too much, but it's pretty great. I'm using the Color Erase color pencils, and I just love the way that these pencils work on paper, the way that it flows onto the paper. It's wonderful. And what's really nice is that when I start to watercolor here, the water doesn't pick up the pencil because it's wax based. All right, so here I'm moving into the watercolor phase, and I'm just laying down some initial washes, kind of working back to front, from the trees in the background all the way in the back. Now, sometimes in this, I would prime this area with water beforehand in order to make sure that the wash is really, really smooth. But I didn't do that this time because I didn't want the wash to be very smooth. I wanted the water to bloom the pigment all over the place. And I really liked that. And so if you want a really smooth, perfect gradient, then it's best to, prime the surface before with a little bit of water. In the lower left-hand corner is a color comp that I created in Photoshop to guide me through the rest of the painting. Now I'm using Daniel Smith watercolors along with this Kolinsky brush, which I've had for like 10 years, been an old faithful. If you take care of your brushes, they will take care of you. There's no reason specifically in watercolor that your brushes shouldn't last forever. In different mediums, especially like acrylics, it can be really hard on your brushes. There's ways of getting around that in oils as well. But because you just have to clean your brush out with water, and as long as you do that, and don't soak your brushes and don't stick them in a cup and let them soak, they will seriously last forever. So here I'm beginning to put some initial washes down on the actual characters themselves. This is kind of more of local colors, just some flats, you could call it. I don't really, I want to have a base coat down so that as I start to apply the colors, I'll just layer them up as I go. As you can see, I'm trying to create some harmony in colors by placing the same color all over the painting. You know, the blue of the ox, of Babe the Blue Ox, is going to be in the pants of pretty much everybody. And so it just helps create harmony. So here I am doing yet another layer. And so every time we layer, the colors just become more saturated and vibrant. And that's what's beautiful about watercolor. I mean, obviously they become darker as well, but they become just beautifully vibrant. And I love the process of building up a painting slowly, using my drawing as a guide. And so I do try to keep my drawing as I'm going. I don't want to necessarily lose it, but it just works as a great guide. And as you can see here, I initially was working on my characters. I'm like, no, I'm actually going to have this brown be part of those pants, and so I don't have to work around everything. But it also just adds yet another layer of color to the piece. In this piece, I try to experiment like I always do. I always want there to be some level of experimentation in my work, where I can push my abilities and my technique. And so with this one, you'll see me experiment with more opaque colors when I get to the acrylic phase. Probably more than I'd actually like to, and so that's something definitely I can work with. One of the issues that I'm dealing with is that these watercolors are a little bit old, and so they have kind of solidified into those like little balls, and so you'll see them kind of everywhere, and I'm kind of working around that. I probably really should just toss these. These have been sitting on this palette for years, and they just need to be replaced. Watercolors will last you forever. It's always good to get the best ones because they will simply just keep going. What I love about this Klinsky brush is how I can be very, very intentional with my brush strokes, and I can get into the smallest areas. It has a great point. At one point, I thought I lost this brush, and it actually legitimately made me sad, which is a little bit silly, but just kind of the way that it is. All right, so now we have moved on to acrylics. I'm using golden fluid acrylics, which allows me to paint very thinly, yet you can see the major difference with acrylics here, as the intensity of the pigment is just well beyond the application that I was using for the watercolor. Now, this is what I like about these fluid acrylics is that I'm able to paint opaquely or thinly. And so like here with Babe, I'm actually painting rather opaquely, and then as I move further over his body to the right, it's actually I kind of thin it out as I'm just testing and playing around. I really haven't been using acrylics very long in this process. This is a brand new process for me to include acrylics. And what I like about it is I can still layer my drawing like I would with the watercolors, but I feel like I can pull it and push it a little bit further than I normally would, and allows me to bring it to completion. Earlier on in my career, I would stop before this phase, right, with watercolor, and then just move on to digital and finish it out that way. But what I want to do is push myself and finish things out in an acrylic phase, which is really exciting. And then eventually be able to then seal the drawing and actually put oils on top, which is really fun. Now, this particular piece I do just finish with acrylics. I was kind of out of time, so I couldn't really move on to oils at this phase. But I learned a lot, and it was really, really, really fun to put into practice. So I'm going to continue out my initial application of acrylics, and one of the things is what's fun to see about a time lapse is you can see actually the mistakes. I have some green on her shirt, which is kind of the wrong color for the shadows. They should actually be warmer considering the local color there. I also experiment with how much of an outline do I want on Paul Bunyan's pants there, and I kind of keep going back and forth about what I want to do. I'm still painting thinly here, and then later on I'm going to actually experiment with moving on to a more of an opaque application, which interestingly enough I actually don't like as much. And you'll kind of see here where Paul and Babe go through a series of not looking great, and they actually don't end up where I necessarily want them to be. But like I said, it's all learning. We're all growing, hopefully together. All right, so when you're painting, it's important to, you know, do your shadows very thinly, and then your highlights should be more opaque. And so now I'm going to experiment with working highlights into the piece. And these are going to be more opaque than the shadows. And once again, I'm still layering things. I'm not painting very, with a lot of paint. There's still a lot of water in the acrylic paints, and so I'm just going to kind of layer things up as I go. And this is where it's important to, here I kind of fixed the chin of Paul, where I had kind of messed up there on a wash. And that's what's great about acrylics, is that you can layer them, and no mistake is unfixable. One of the things that's great about this technique is that I believe it takes advantage of the areas of the mediums that are great and kind of works around the disadvantages. For example, the quick dryingness of acrylics can sometimes be such a detriment while you're painting, and it's hard to keep them wet and it's hard to work them. And some artists go through great lengths to keep them wet. Now, in my opinion, I would then just move on to oils where they are wet, and I don't need to try to keep them wet and workable. And you can blend and do all that kind of stuff. But for example, here, I do want things to dry quickly. I want to be able to layer. And if I was to be working with oils, that just wouldn't be possible. The paint would be mixing. And now there's processes that do use that, but that's not what I'm trying to do today. I want to layer. So now here I'm going in pretty thickly with some acrylic, and unfortunately it just was way too thick. I shouldn't have done this. And as I look back at what I did, and even in the moment, I'm like, what am I doing? What have I done? And this is the important part, I think, about making art, is to realize when you've done something that you're just not happy with, and how to come back and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna keep going, and maybe next time we're going to make an adjustment. And so I think leaning into the fact that I'm an indirect painter, and that going over a complete area like that and basically erasing all the work I had done with my watercolor is simply just not the way forward. And that's not what I want to do. And so when you're working on something and you mess up and you do something you don't like, it's important to say, okay, I messed up, and now I'm going to make it better. What I'm going to do next time that allows me to move forward as an artist. So it's kind of crazy. As you can look at his hair, you're like, why in the world is his hair red? And this is because I'm planning ahead. I want that red to shine through the layers of the acrylic, and we'll have some great luminosity and brightness to the color that will come through. And so that's what's great about working in layers, is that you can allow some of the colors underneath to do the heavy lifting. But you have to be able to plan ahead, and you have to be able to understand how the colors mix together and how they work together, and not just be worrying about just the color that you're laying down right now, but how they're going to work together or not work together. Now, there are people who can paint from one edge of the painting to the other with no problems. And while that's fantastic for them, it doesn't work for me. I have to find a way that works for me. And this kind of layering process, working on the piece as a whole, allows me to not get stuck just in one spot, but kind of move from one part to another and working up the painting as a whole together. Now we're going to start moving kind of towards the end part of the painting, which is where you're probably going to see some of the light. It's not going to see as many drastic changes because I'm starting to put highlights in. The detail work is going to be coming in, and it's not going to move too much. Now, there are areas that I have left intentionally is so that I can come back later if I wanted to layer over. And so for example, there are these candles around the couple. And I've intentionally just left that for the last stages of the painting because one, they're kind of independent and they don't need to be addressed right now, and they're not going to affect the entire composition. And number two, I enjoy working on characters more, and so they're going to get my focus. And of course, the characters in this piece are what reign supreme. They need to be the most rendered out of the entire painting. I think if faces are right, people will forgive you for anything else. But if something's wrong with the character, their eyes are going to be drawn to it and they're not going to be able to deal with it. And so make sure that when you're working on anything with a character, that you give it, your very best. And my goodness, does my head and face get in the way of the camera a lot. I need to find maybe a better way to record these, but this is real. This is recorded in real time and I've sped it up, and so I guess my head's going to get in there. All right, so this I believe is the last phase, the last pass at this painting. I've kind of broke it down to different sittings, and so that I can kind of work as I'm going. You can see my phone peeking in there because I love to listen to stories on audiobooks as I paint, and it's really fun. So here we got some highlights on Babe to kind of finish up how we want the light to be hitting him. I did bring up some reference actually to figure out, gosh, how do I want the light to be landing on him? Now, because I painted him completely opaquely, getting the shadows, I'm having to kind of redo everything. Once again, like I said before, we learn, we grow, and these are things that we can work on for next time. Kind of the same thing happened to Paul's pants too, where I just kind of overworked it and put too much paint down, and now I'm having to kind of go in and fix that. So I'm using a pretty small brush here to get some details on her face and on her shoulders and her hair. And then you can see that I was fixing the shadows on her shirt because they were just way too much green in there, and it was just causing it to look a little bit muddy. And as you can see on his face, on his hair, how that underlying red is shining through, but because we overlaid it with some oranges and some yellow, it's kind of giving it a nice glow. It's kind of funny because I did so much painting in a digital way that I sometimes think of how I'm going to do that in the real world, and vice versa. I think they influence each other. All right, so here we're moving on to the candles of love that he placed around as he's asking her to marry him. And what's great is that because of the layering process, I can be like, oh my goodness, these candles looking a little bit too green, and I can come back later and then hit them with a little bit more blue. There, I moved over to the sign for a little bit because I'm allowing the paint on the candles to dry a little bit. Just fixing a highlight here a little bit on Babe's face. That's what I'm really enjoying about acrylics, is that, here I made a mistake and I can come in and just paint right over it, layer it up, and allow it to move on. Painting in this way just brings me so much joy. I love it. I loved every moment of this painting. And I can't wait to show you guys some more time lapses here as we go, hopefully with my head less in the shot every step of the way. But as you can see, this is basically how I build a painting. Many layers, working all over the painting at all times, seeing something that needs to be fixed, moving over to that, and allowing the painting to emerge out of nothing. And I think that's part of the magic of painting, is that this initially was a blank piece of paper, and over time, a painting has come out of the darkness in a way. So once again here I'm painting pretty opaquely with some white to hit that sign. And that's the beauty of layering in acrylics. Now, I wanted to just kind of indicate some of the stonework here. But what's great is that because I'm on paper, I can still decide, hey, I want to paint very, very translucently. And so there was a lot of water in that pigment. And I could just kind of do just a couple simple brush strokes that indicate the ground and not have to go in and render that opaquely. And so that's one of the great things about being able to work quickly in a piece like this. So I'm putting in some of the final stages, the final finishing touches of the piece, and deciding, okay, I need to stop working on this. What is the last thing that has to be done before I can package this up and send it on its way to the owner. So thank you so much for watching this process from start to finish, a watercolor and acrylic painting. Take care.